as the boarding house had ended. The White Swan was torn down in 1927. The Ashfield would be demolished a few years later. For a period, the Belle Rockton became part of the CCC, Civilian Conservation Corps program. Young men from poor circumstances were housed at the Belle while they worked on farm projects. At the end of that program, a main function of this landmark structure was that of a youth center. Mrs. Frank Donovan, in the early 40s, the mother of teenagers, is remembered as a driving force of the Volunteer Youth Center project. As a new century nears, many memories linger of the early times and the lives involved in the varied uses of the stately old structure. The Belle Rockton remains a place of memories as it takes on the identity of the Silk City's fine museum through the efforts of the Belding Area Historical Society and interested and generous citizens. Nearly every community served by rail has had a train wreck to talk about. In a 1990 issue of the New Belding Home News, Clayton Campbell reports his research on Belding's great train wreck. On a beautiful morning in May of 1905, the Pier Marquette Flyer pulled from the station in Grand Rapids on its Sunday excursion to Saginaw. After a stop in Lowell, the Flyer was on its way to Belding. In the heart of Belding, near Main Street, just past the White Swan, the Richardson Mill boarding house, the front wheels of the engine, according to reports of the time, plowed up the track. The ties were torn up for 100 feet or more. The engine left the tracks, the tender being lifted as high as 10 feet in the air. Engineer George Smith was trapped in the engine. He was badly scalded by the ruptured boiler. A portion of the engine was cut away to free the engineer. He survived and was eventually back at work on another engine. The fireman, T.E. McHenry, had jumped from the crashing train and was able to return to the aid of his fellow worker. The passengers, some thrown from their seats, most badly shaken but none hurt seriously, were picked up by another train and taken on to their excursion destination in Saginaw. A few years into the new century would find the automobile working its way into everyday life. Belding had developed as an important supply and shopping center. Snyder's Store. New fall hats for men. This store offered a wide choice of fabrics. The Frank Ireland Hardware, Charles Kuhn is pictured. By the mid-teens, the dirt and mud streets would start giving away to brick. The crew laying bricks on Main Street, near the bridge, include 7th from the left, Leonard McPherson. The Belding Hotel was the gathering place of community leaders. Here, a get-together of a dozen former mayors. Back row, Willard Spicer, Clyde Knapp, Bert Hall, Elmer Fales, Billy Sandel, Willis Bricker, and seated Judge Lamphook, Bert Spencer, Henry Smith, Fred Underwood, and Fred Washburn. Note the container of apples. Belding's first real fire department was organized in 1895. William Pope, an engineer at Factory B, was the first fire chief. Prior to that, Belding had experienced a number of serious fires, including one started at the rear of the L.S. Roll Company and spreading to several other places of business. A $15,000 blaze, a considerable sum of money in the 19th century. An even bigger fire in April of 1892 destroyed the newly built Bricker Block, including the Bricker Hotel. In 1895, the new fire department had 50 members, each paid $2 per fire. The department was reorganized in 1898 with but 12 men in the organization, and the pay was $5 per quarter. The Belding Fire Department was motorized in about 1920. A tractor fire. Jim Thomas prepares for the big one. The fire at the John Bean Foundry in 1952 required the efforts of Belding and several other fire departments. Some of the names in early days of the Belding Fire Department include Bert J. Story, John Stalin, C. Fuller Dorr, and A.M. Dorey. In 1917, plans were announced for a new library, a gift from Alva N. Belding, and to be dedicated to his mother and father, Mary and Hiram Belding, and to be built on the very land owned, cleared, and occupied by Alva and his father in the late 1850s. The groundbreaking ceremony was an impressive event. Of classical revival design with a tile roof, with interior of marble and finest wood trim, it was to be and to remain one of the finest small-town libraries anywhere. On a cool day in May of 1918, the dedication of this marvelous new library was held in a large Chautauqua tent. However, the feelings were warm toward Alva N. Belding and his family. A town so closely identified with one industry, a so-called company town, rarely has such a close and good relationship. Those attending included Senator William Alden Smith, Brenton and Florence Wilson Hall. The Alva N. Belding Library has served the wider community well and continues as a resource for young and old. The silk industry long faded from the scene, now only a memory, but this grand gift keeps on giving. Almost from the start in the early 1870s of the lumber industry, and then the coming of the silk mills, Belding had been in a growth cycle. By 1913, citizens would be served by a new city hall, a new depot. All over town, fine homes were being built in almost every style of the period. While many of the outstanding examples remain, other architectural gems, unfortunately, have disappeared. While many Ionia County young men were away fighting in the war to end all wars, the folks back home were heavy into food production. The expanse of fertile farmland in the area played a key role in the war effort. Red Cross workers, Salvation Army volunteers could be seen at work in the community. After the shooting stopped, the returning doughboys soon had the situation well in hand. Donovan's was a popular spot to pamper the sweet tooth. Ice cream, a Coke, candy. George Workman's store. The Silk City Grocery on South Bridge, owned by Alta White Hayland and Reva Sussex Dollar. The shoe store. Lewis and Herman Salzman. Local tailors. Albert Salzman of Salzman and Son Dry Cleaners. Ireland's Hardware, Skellinger's Drugstore. For years, those visiting the Bross family, Belding's very first family, would find an unusual display of lawn ornaments. The bigger-than-life pewter dog was the big attraction. He would become known as Sparky. His appearance has changed on occasion with a new paint scheme. After leaving the Bross lawn, his homes have included the City Hall lawn, from where he was kidnapped on one occasion. His home nowadays, thought to be safer, is in the town fire hall. Aggie the Bear was a real crowd pleaser at Cook's Park. This mini zoo was located near the City Hall, in the heart of Belding. Along with a somewhat trained bear, Mr. Cook also proudly presented his deer, raccoons, and peacocks. The 4th of July was the big celebration of the year, with band concerts, ox roasts, and parades. Belding had any number of bands eager to participate in any celebration. Belding's now famous Labor Day celebration had its start in 1905 under the auspices of the Knights of Pythias Lodge. Entertainment included free acts, such as the Daring Young Man on the High Wire. The governor, Fred Warner, issued a proclamation requesting the general observance of Labor Day. The first Labor Day celebration was marked by tragedy when V.J. Carr of Greenville parachuted from a hot air balloon, landing in Flat River, where he drowned. The Belding Labor Day celebration, with its outstanding parade, is considered something of an original. The community has had its ups and downs, depressions, recessions, but the annual Labor Day celebration goes on without let-up. The community leaders have been more than willing to take part in this historical, in fact, pioneering celebration. Participation ranges from youngsters, commercial interests, musical groups, and of course, politicians, including future presidents of the United States. By 1925, with the death in December of that year of Alva N. Belding, youngest of the Belding brothers, a downturn in the fortunes of the company and the community had started. Alva N. was the best known of the brothers in his old hometown. He never lost interest in the community. Even as he neared his 88th year, he would travel from his home in Rockville, Connecticut, to Belding twice a year, traveling in later years by car. Stores in Belding were closed during the funeral period. The silk mills were closed for the day, and the flags flew at half-mast. Just prior to the death of Alva N. Belding, the company was sold for $10 million to an Eastern syndicate. It was then known as the Belding Hemingway Company. At about this time, synthetic materials were starting to appear on the market. So within a few years, it was obvious the silk business was slipping away. The new corporation was taking some of their manufacturing back east. And with the start of the Great Depression and competition, the silk industry that made a city was all over. Belding's beautiful library was now a gathering place for people to keep warm and pass idle hours. The effects of the Depression were widely felt, but in Belding, especially, where a key industry had collapsed. The boarding house for young women, the White Swan, had already been demolished. And by 1933, the elaborate Ashfield would also disappear. The newest of the three, the Bell Rockton, lives on. Even in the bad times, American tradition dictates some action. These men were part of a CWA project for restoration work on the library. Soon Belding's old iron bridges would be replaced with modern concrete and steel bridges, designed for the heavy auto and truck traffic. Belding's landmark hotel would be demolished in the early 40s, no longer needed. A 1940 gathering of the Silk Mill ladies. With the effects of the loss of the silk mills and the nationwide depression still not totally over, Belding's young men and women were off once again to fight in a major war. The Belding and vicinity on a roll. The Home Guards. Some of the quiet mills would come once again to life and supply materials for the war effort. With the war over, the post-war era of change was underway. Where the Belding Hotel once stood, the Collier Theater was built, with a bank on the corner. The Opera House would be converted to the Rose Ballroom, with a mirrored ball, with the emphasis on dancing. The Gibson Refrigerator Company would take over the White Mill, construct an addition, and would build hundreds of thousands of room air conditioners. In the early 1970s, plans to restore the downtown area in more or less original style were shelved to make way for the more drastic move to tear down most of the old buildings and replace with a closed mall. Belding has enjoyed long periods of growth and prosperity, has sunk to low points during the Depressions. Its citizens understand, they weave and bend with the joys and disappointments. The original and continued pioneering spirit of those who have lived in Belding and those now living appreciate that their community has a unique history. A spirit of achievement. When down, we can get up and go forward. Belding is a natural for pleasant living. It's America's city made from silk.